still up. No, it ain't.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Uncut History. Yes, we're without the intro. Totally not because I forgot to upload it. Let's see. Maybe, it doesn't feel right if we're going to start this without our intro. Let me go over, and yes, you're going to hear some chirping in the background. We'll explain about that in a few moments. Where did I stow it? See, the problem is, the lovely intro we have for Uncut History, it is too big actually to stow it onto our brands here on StreamYards. It's one of the lovely quirks of StreamYards. And if I can find the nice little folder, well, I would say it's a nice folder. I actually have a zillion folders. And then it's going to say that the intro's in there. Hey, look, let's just forget about these first 30 seconds and play you that intro now.
It's the wonder of nature, baby! Yes, we'll reel around the flag, boys will reel it once again, shouting a battle cry of freedom. We will reel it from the hillside, all together from the plain, shouting the battle cry of freedom. The Union forever,
Look at that right there. There he is. Very good. We made Howard right on now. I don't think we can succeed in making all of All right. Welcome, everybody, officially to episode 69 of Uncut History, live on Readout Productions. And like on cue, I played the intro the way it should be. And our chat is starting to tune in. We got Wrangler joining in. The ghost of Howard's right arm is here as well. And gotta be quite honest, I didn't really know what this week's topic was going to be. I kind of went back and forth on what we were going to discuss tonight. But then it hit on me that, hey, I said we're going to talk about the Whiskey Rebellion on a couple Uncut Histories this summer. And it's August and summer's almost over, so maybe we should get on to that. So tonight we are going to talk about the Whiskey Rebellion. In particular, we're going to talk about one aspect of it, and that's really its only major battle. Now, before we delve into the history of the Whiskey Rebellion, I'm aware a lot of explanations in order for tonight's setup. We are obviously not in the studio, and there is a very, very loud and annoying live audience right over here, which you're going to hear the whole night. And I've tried as best as I can to minimize them. I've even brought out a different microphone for tonight's stream, which, by the way, let me know. This microphone I purchased expressly to use on the Fubar Digital Lounge, which is my sister channel alongside Humble Collector and our co-host Jess. We all have a podcast, which we used to call the Heterochromedia podcast. It didn't work out to, I mean, we had fun on the Heterochromedia podcast, but that name got really hard to say, and we decided to reboot it into the Fubar Digital Lounge. We'll talk about more about that before night's over. Anyways, I bought this microphone because I wanted something that's smaller and more compact to drag out when I go on the road and meet up with my co-hosts. Boy, is this microphone loud. Now, I want everybody to see how low the setting I have it on. See how low the setting is. When we recorded the first installment of a new series for Fubar, we had it at 2/3 the volume. We kind of blew our eardrums out when we were listening to the replay. And you'll see that if you listen to the new video coming out tomorrow. And I apologize about the horrible audio to begin with. So I've learned that you have to turn this volume very low. So please let me know in the chat if this is still too loud. I'll try to tune it down a bit more. As for the annoying crowd over there, I'm looking at you, wild woman. So I'm actually downstairs. I'm not up in the room. We are down here for a bunch of different reasons that I don't have time to get into. And this is the best location to film downstairs. The bad news is it's the location of our parakeets that my family has. And two of the free parakeets, they're not from a store. They were born here in the house. Now, they'll tell you that parakeets do not breed like when they're kept in a cage. They don't have the right conditions, is what the storekeepers will tell you. Well, here's what I'll tell you. The right conditions for a parakeet to breed is apparently smoking, drinking, and playing Van Halen very loud. We had two older birds. They hatched multiple eggs. Only one of the older birds, the father, survives. And then we have his son and his daughter, who were both born here. They're over there in the cage. The female bird defies all logic. She has splayed legs, which she probably should not have survived. But here we are about 2 years later. She's still going. And she is the weirdest bird. Now, unfortunately, I can't really pivot the camera over to show you because the camera is mounted into the laptop. But believe me, one day, maybe I should just make a video about the birds. They're crazy. So they're going to be there. They're a live audience. I apologize in advance. They don't have feeder discipline is what I'm trying to say. But we'll make the best of it. The good news is we got really good lighting in this setup, as you can tell. And we got some props tonight. Yes. We're talking about whiskey. I brought the whiskey out. And since we are talking about the Whiskey Rebellion, I think it goes without obvious. This following stream is going to involve the talks of the consumption of alcohol. The stream is also going to show you the use of some tobacco products because we're going to have some fun tonight here on Readout Productions. So off the top, just going from the top, Readout Productions does not condone the use of alcohol or any other drugs, especially while you're driving, and not if you're under the age of 21. All right. With that said, let's have some fun. And the cigar's burned. What a great way to start. Before we worry about the cigar, let me go over. Since we are talking about the Whiskey Rebellion, I figured it'd be appropriate to sample some Old Overholt. You may recognize this brand, partly because it's one of, if not the oldest major rye whiskey brand in the United States of America. Also, this has been featured before on Retracing History. You may recall an episode where we went and visited West Overton, the small village where the Old Overholt Distillery was born and was located for about a century. Now, this was not established until 1810, so it's about a decade removed from the events we're going to talk about tonight, but it is tied to the region we're talking about. So let's just have some good Western Pennsylvania rye whiskey and try not to pour it on the camera. I mean, that'd be very bad. It'd be very bad. And straight up, I've never actually had Old Overholt until tonight. So you're in for a special treat. Yeah, I can see why it's the foundation of American rye. Actually, not as painful as I thought it was going to be. I've had some stronger stuff. So that's actually dangerous. If this isn't hurting me, I may have a few more, and then we're going to be in some world of trouble before tonight's stream's over. So there we are. All right. Oh, and I don't even have the Google slide up. So while I try to get the Google slide on, hey, look, Wrangler's gifted us a lovely 420. Thank you very much. Thank you, Wrangler, for the past, about 2 years now? You've been supporting us regularly in the chat. I greatly appreciate it. All right, let's get that slideshow up because, tonight is, I do have a slideshow. I made it this evening, and then I went upstairs and did a few things, and then I was on a phone call, and then I forgot what time it was, and now we are here. And now you're going to watch me get completely banned off of the TubeU with my cigar. It's great, guys. This is going to be so deplatformed. Oh, well, we're rebels after all. We're talking about rebels, aren't we, tonight? And the Google slide. There it is. So first things first, what we're going to do. I'm going to be right back one more.
I feel I was denied critical, need-to-know information.
The cigar we're having tonight, there is a reason why we're having a cigar on stream. I wouldn't normally actually do this, but it is themed around whiskey themed. We got it from Diesel brand. I had the label. It's just basically like a whiskey barrel. Bourbon whiskey aged rabbit hole. Rabbit hole. We go down rabbit holes here. It's like this cigar is designed for this stream. Pretty nice. All right. So, without any further ado, we're 10 minutes in. I know you guys want to hear about the history. Let's get to the history. Let us talk about the Whiskey Rebellion's only true battle. So, let me set the scene first. So, it's the early 1790s in the United States of America. And, the United States started as 13 British colonies that rebelled and with the assistance of France and Spain, got its independence from Great Britain. And then for a little while, we were under the Articles of Confederation. That was a complete mess. That was one big pile of turd. Almost caused the United States to implode on itself, trying to operate as 13 different countries, essentially, is what it was doing. So many of our founding fathers decided that we needed a new constitution to operate under. They're going to organize and they're going to ratify the U.S. Constitution, which we're still under today in 2024. And since then, they've elected a official for the executive branch, of course, our president. And the first president was George Washington, elected unanimously in 1789, and he'll win re-election in 1792. And around this time, the United States is just starting to grow out, just starting to adopt a few more states, but there are things already troubling the new nation. For one, on the western frontier, you got this Northwest War, which some of you may have never heard of before. If you're a longtime viewer for Readout Productions, you're familiar with it. We've talked about this. We've talked about St. Clair's defeat, and we've talked about Fallen Timbers. Actually, we talked about the latter on this live stream just about a year ago, if I'm not mistaken. The Northwest War was what happened when the United States of America tried to cross the Ohio River and move into what they call the Northwest Territory, what we now know as the states of Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois, which was home to a number of indigenous tribes. Some of them original to the territory. A lot of them are actually refugees that have been shoved across the Ohio and stuck in this Northwest Reserve after the British colonies and even the French colonies were established. So it's a continuation of the Indian Wars European colonists have been fighting for a couple centuries in North America. So that had been going on since 1785, and I've been really chewing into the economy of the United States of America. And the federal government were hoping that it would be easy to get all that land, kick the natives out of it, and then sell it to the American people. And that's how we're going to bankroll the United States government. Well, those native tribes in the Northwest Confederacy put up quite the resistance, were able to wipe out Arthur St. Clair's American army in 1791 at the Battle of the Wabash. I got a whole 3-part series about that on the channel, by the way. And at this point, people are looking for other ways to fund the government. And when we go back east to the cities like the federal capital of Philadelphia, remember, the United States government actually started in Philadelphia. That was our capital for many years. Over in Philadelphia, what's going on is you're already having a political divide. Factionalism is already taken hold because there's a pretty large sect of elected officials as well as other members of the government that do not like the U.S. Constitution. They think it gives the federal government way too much power. So you had a split between the Federalists and Anti-Federalists as the Constitution was being debated. Federalists obviously won that argument. They got the Constitution ratified, albeit with some amendments made to make the Anti-Federalists happy. And then the Anti-Federalists kind of started reforming into a proper political party known as the Democratic Republicans, whose symbol you can see on the right-hand side. And then on the left side, the black and white version is the symbol of the Federalist Party. So here's some of your earliest political parties in the United States, constantly duking it out over legislature. It's going to be passed into government, into law. And one of the big contentious pieces of law was how we're going to finance the government. And well, you know where this is going. Yes, Alexander Hamilton and his Whiskey Excise Act, or the Whiskey Tax for short. part of Alexander Hamilton's fiscal policy when he becomes Secretary of the Treasury at this time, he proposes that we can fund the federal government by putting a tax not only on imports, but also domestic goods as well. So he is talking about bringing on this tax on whiskey. And why whiskey? Because he actually did debate around, what am I going to put a tax on? But he ultimately decides it must be whiskey. Whiskey is a luxury item. This is something we couldn't live without. This is a sin tax. So, it might actually be a little healthy for us to pay, have to pay this tax because it'll make us not want to drink as much whiskey. At least that's how he promoted it to Congress. The tax would be implemented by putting 6 to 18 cents tax on every gallon that's produced by a still, or a distillery could just pay out a flat rate for the year. Well, I already got the Whiskey King, Bob. It's here. It's right here. I promise you. Look, behold the wonders of Abraham Overhaul. Look at him. Look at him. It is said that over the years, they've tried to make him look less and less angry. All right. In any case, back to our scheduled programming. Where's our scheduled programming button? That's not it. That's it. That's the scheduled programming button. So you had a couple different ways you can pay this tax, but the real problem was it was very lopsided. It was heavily in favor of larger distilleries, actual business distilleries that had massive stills, multiple stills, and could afford to pay the flat rate and pay off the federal government, essentially. Smaller distilleries, your farmers, essentially, to have a still in the back of their property to distill all sorts of crops, such as rye, wheat, barley, and other types of crops, corn, to distill some of this stuff to make whiskey, because it was more profitable to send whiskey to market across the Appalachian Mountain Range to sell them in markets in Philadelphia, rather than try to send them as raw crops. Because by the time they got to Philadelphia or another eastern port, the crop would have been useless, it'd been dead. Nobody's buying it. So a lot of small farmers had stills, mainly so they can sell their crop in a lucrative capacity. But with this tax, it was devastating. They couldn't really afford to pay the per the gallon, and they could definitely not afford the flat rate. So, and to make one other problem, let's say they decide, I'm not going to pay the whiskey tax. This is ridiculous. I'm not paying Hamilton's tax. Well, if you did not, you would receive a summons to federal court to pay that fine or face some more severe punishment for refusing to pay the federal government. And for those that are living west of the mountains, all the federal courts are east of the mountains. There's no airplanes going an hour between Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Philadelphia. That is a multi-week journey, a very costly and dangerous journey that you may not survive if you're going from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia. So the whiskey tax, well, Hamilton hyped it up as it's a sin tax. It'll make us all better people. We're going to put down the bottle, because if we want to drink the bottle, as I knock my whiskey glass over, yeah, that'll happen. That'll happen. If we pay the sin tax, it'll make us better people. We won't be as get into the debauchery, and the federal government's going to profit from it. It's going to be great, guys. In reality, it is, well, all the people in power, if they have a distillery, they'll just pay the flat rate. And I didn't add it in the slideshow. What's going to happen is a lot of your small distillers, they're going to go out of business, because people are going to go buy from the larger distillers because they can afford it. So you kill off the competition, the small competition for the big fishes in the small ponds, essentially. So all these reasons is why those, particularly in Western Pennsylvania, opposed the whiskey tax. So, beginning in 1791, March to be exact, is when the whiskey tax went into effect here across the United States, including here in the Pittsburgh area. And, well, it did not go well. A large portion of southwestern Pennsylvania vehemently opposed the tax for reasons I just mentioned. There's also a ethnic reason for it, and because of the fact, ethnic, cultural. I'm already canceled. Look, don't worry. I'm not going to get canceled for misidentifying somebody. I'll get canceled for smoking tobacco on camera. Yeah, that's far more worth getting canceled over than misidentifying somebody. This is far more worth it. Anyways, So, Wrangler pops in. It was like a lucrative business for the Dukes until Boss Hogg screwed them over. Whiskey is the best and easiest way to store excess grain, indeed. And also, I didn't say it officially earlier, but hail to the King Bob! King Bob, that's his name. See, his name's right there. The king is here. I must, bow before the king. So, there's a cultural reason as to why those in southwestern Pennsylvania vehemently oppose the tax, in addition to all the other things I just mentioned. A good portion of the population around Pittsburgh in the 1790s is Scot Irish. Scot Irish have a legacy of resistant authority. They've fled from Great Britain to escape the English king. Then they fought a rebellion against that king. And now they really don't want to be under the yoke of another authority figure, the United States federal government. And it also shows why they live in southwestern Pennsylvania. They had to flee. They had to flee Scotland and Ireland as the English crown took over the rest of Great Britain. So they come to this new free world. They arrive in Pennsylvania, which is welcoming all religious beliefs, except all the property around Philadelphia is taken up by the Quakers and also some of the Anglican Church. So they have to pack up, make an arduous journey across the mountains, which could risk their lives, and settle in this contested territory of southwestern Pennsylvania, having to deal with Native American raids, also to deal with just the elements of Mother Nature trying to kill them off. But they managed to cut out a very crude way of living west of the Allegheny Mountains. And actually, a lot of western Pennsylvania are willing to rebel against the crown before the eastern half is. So we have a rebellion in our blood. So they don't want to listen to authority even in the 1790s, is what I'm trying to say. Pretty good cigar. Made a good choice tonight. Well, long run, I didn't make a good choice, but in the short run for tonight's theme, I made a good choice. So they vehemently oppose the tax on multiple reasons, for cultural reasons, for just the financial reasons, for the distance reasons. So the federal government puts a tax in effect March 1791. Everybody hates it. Everybody hates Alexander Hamilton for it. And actually, they're going to initially appeal to Hamilton, the U.S. Congress overall. They're going to appeal to the Congress, and you're going to have these delegates of southwestern Pennsylvania meet in 1791 and 1792, and they're going to send petitions of their grievances to Congress and saying, hey, we'll pay the tax, but can you think of a way where it's not as crude of a move and you're not just giving it all to the wealthy, that you can make sure that we also are going to survive? And while Alexander Hamilton, he responded. He's like, all right, I'll amend the tax. I'll drop it by 1 cent. And it's at that moment that Redoubt Productions grew a burning hatred for Alexander Hamilton. So yeah, Hamilton insisted they were paying a tax. He felt that they weren't that a bunch of farmers out west aren't going to boss around the elite of the cities. The people in the cities know better than the rural countryside. That is what's happening here. So the resistance gets more and more brutal. And eventually you're going to start having, when these tax collectors come out to southwestern Pennsylvania, leave the city of Pittsburgh, which really wasn't a city at this point. It was a little village at the point. When they come out, they may meet Tom the Tinker. And Tom the Tinker is not necessarily one individual, though it technically is. Tom the Tinker is a name that is used to scare these tax collectors or federal authorities. And basically, if it is found that you are, trying to enforce this tax, enforce the will of the federal government, this unlawful act that is against the rights of humans, well, Tom the Tinker may pay a visit to your place of residence and fix the problem. And that may be in the form of tar and feathering of tax collectors, as you see illustrated down below. And you're also going to have incidences as we get to 1793 and 1794, as federal authorities are coming out to investigate who is doing the tar and feathering. Those guys are also going to get very, very roughed up by Tom the Tinker and his friends. We'll talk more about Tom the Tinker, as he's very important to the only battle of the Whiskey Rebellion. By 1794, the federal government had enough. And they're going to appoint Revolutionary War General John Neville as the revenue inspector of the Pittsburgh area. Now, initially, Neville's going to try to send some subordinates out to enforce the tax and tries to rent multiple offices in southwestern Pennsylvania until all those taxes get stoned. By June of 1794, the Attorney General Bradford, who's pictured in the top right corner, he is actually going to send U.S. Marshal David Lennox out to Pittsburgh to serve a court summons for people who have not paid their taxes. Now, just before Lennox left, I should mention the U.S. Congress actually achieved in amending the federal court where the federal courts are located, and that they would start trying to open federal courts closer to Pittsburgh to make it easier. But before that went into effect, before federal courts are going to be opened up closer to Pittsburgh, Lennox's writs had already been written out by Bradford, and there was no way to override them. So, crap. All of this could have been avoided if Bradford and Hamilton and the Washington administration just waited one more week. All right, in any case, Lennox is going to come out to Pittsburgh in July of 1794, and by all counts, most of his writs are served without incident. He gets to Pittsburgh, has a lovely chat with a local lawyer who warns him that, hey, you might not want to leave Pittsburgh. They don't like you south of Pittsburgh. Particularly, don't go into Washington County. That is the seat of the hatred toward Hamilton. Don't go down there. And Lennox is like, well, I've had no problems. I think people will respect, at the end of the day, I'm not here to enforce a tax. I'm just here to serve some summons to courts. They can complain to me. I'm willing to take it, but I don't think any violence is going to come of it. I wonder where this is going. Note to self, talking while trying to have a cigar, not necessarily a good combination. In any case, that brings us to the events of July 15th, 16th, and 17th, 1794. So on July 15th, 1794, David Lennox is going to depart Pittsburgh to serve the last of his court summons to southern Allegheny County and hopefully to Washington County as well. Godspeed, Spider-Man. Now, before he leaves, John Neville, the revenue inspector for the Pittsburgh area, he's actually going to volunteer to serve as Lennox's guy to serve these last warrants out. Now, a little bit about John Neville. John Neville, as I mentioned, he is a general of the American Revolution. I actually got the notes down here. Look, notes. It's a semi-professional stream. John Neville was actually born in Virginia in the 1730s, and he's a veteran of the French-Indian War, reportedly served alongside George Washington in the French-Indian War. And if you've ever watched some of our videos about the Virginia Regiment, you'll know they really liked their land grants, particularly land grants that entitled Virginia to claim the forks of the Ohio River, which is where Pittsburgh now stands. So at one point, southwestern Pennsylvania was actually Virginia. And after the French and Indian War, Neville decided to take advantage of that situation, and he's going to move up into the Pittsburgh area right before the American Revolution. And the Virginia government actually make him a commander at Fort Dunmore, the main fort at the Forks of the Ohio for Virginia. Interesting story. There's also a Pennsylvania fort at the Forks of the Ohio called Fort Pitt. By the way, Dunmore and Pitt are the same structure. That is right. In 1774, Virginia moved militiamen to Fort Pitt and declared it Virginia territory, which greatly upset the Pennsylvania government. Neville was in charge of some of those Virginian soldiers, and he would stay in the area permanently. He would end up starting to set up a massive estate about 5 to 6 miles south of the Forks of the Ohio River, just the very southern tip of Allegheny County today. And he's going to establish ultimately 10,000 acres on this estate. And he'll have two structures, one called Woodville, a one-story farmhouse, which was eventually given to his son Presley. And then John moved across the creek on a large high ground and built a two-story mansion, which he called Bower Hill. Now, Hamilton, as I mentioned, had 10,000 acres. He had a wife. He had a son. He also had a daughter. And he owned it seems he had about a dozen slaves that were under his jurisdiction once we get to the post-Revolutionary War age. And also during the Revolution, he and his son Presley both served in the siege of Charleston. and were prisoners of war at one point. And for his services, John was breveted to a general's rank before the war ended. So he returns to southwestern Pennsylvania. It's not Virginia anymore. It's now Pennsylvania. He got to deal with that. But he is going to try to be a good civic leader. He's going to get into local politics. He's also going to establish an Episcopal church around the Pittsburgh area. That's interesting because didn't I just mention most of the folks are Scott-Irish? They're Presbyterian. That's right. Neville was putting up a church that is essentially a different denomination than the Presbyterian. So we got mostly Presbyterians, low farming, Scott-Irish Presbyterians. And then we got your wealthier people in Pittsburgh who typically were from the Episcopal Church. And then you got Neville in particular, got Bower Hill, 10,000 acres. He has slaves. It's a plantation essentially in southwestern Pennsylvania. The reason I'm bringing this all up is that, and at least how I interpret events, Neville's a bit of an outsider. Now, by all accounts, every book I've read about the Whiskey Rebellion says Neville was very well liked by the local population prior to the Whiskey Rebellion. I have a bit of a difficulty believing that. Were they cordial to him in public? I do believe that. Did they sincerely like Neville? I don't know. And in any case, the events that are about to happen are going to make Neville public enemy number one in Pittsburgh for a few days. So now that you know about John Neville, and now you get to watch me try to light my freaking cigar again. This is just a fun stream, ain't it, guys?
There's always an alien battle cruiser or a Carillion death ray or an intergalactic plague that's about to wipe out life on this miserable little planet. The only way these people get on with their happy lives is they do not know about it.
You may ask what that had to do with my talk tonight. It had nothing. I just want to cover up me lighting a cigar. Also, Tommy Lee Jones. I'm always willing to play some Tommy Lee Jones on this channel. So, with all that explained about who John Neville was, oh no. City folk think they know best? What's changed? Make tar and feathers great again. Oh, that would be a hat that would get me into some serious trouble. So, in any case, let's get back to our story. So, I told you about a little bit about John Neville, so you know who he is and his situation, how he relates to the local population of Pittsburgh. He's probably the wealthiest man in Pittsburgh, in all intents and purposes, in 1794. He's the Carnegie of Pittsburgh in 1794. Ghost of Howard's right arm would like that analogy. So, here comes Lennox and Neville. They come down to the Miller homestead to serve some of these court summons. Now, the Miller family have been around in what we call the South Park region of Pittsburgh today for about 30 years now. Oliver Miller Sr., he had immigrated from Ireland, and he had set up a massive homestead sometime after the French and Indian War. And I think he has at least 5 different sons that are living all in his homestead at the time of the Whiskey Rebellion. If I have him written down here. Oh, yes, look, notes about Oliver Miller perfectly. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 5 sons. Okay, I can do math even when I'm drinking and smoking. So, one of the sons is by the name of William Miller. And William Miller, he's in his 40s. He's a militiaman from the American Revolution. Yeah, it's been a little while since I've read about the Millers. There's a lot of Millers in Pittsburgh, so you got to figure out which one I'm talking about. Oh, apparently Mr. Miller was apparently attached to Daniel Morgan's riflemen at the Battle of Saratoga. That totally wouldn't come in handy if you're rebelling against the federal government. So he had acquired his father's still upon Oliver Miller Sr.'s death. And William Miller is living on a property adjacent to his father's house. His father's house is actually resided in now by one of William's younger brothers, a James Miller. So William Miller, he's over in his little log shack. Then he got a larger log shack that James Miller's living in. And a little bit down the road, you're also going to have Thomas Miller. He's living down there, and John and Alexander. But William's our main story. He's our main story because, well, Lennox has a court summons with William Miller's name on it. Because William Miller does have a still. To be exact, it's his father's still that he's inherited upon his father's death. And it's used to distill crops and ship it to market like anybody else in southwestern Pennsylvania. And of course, he's refused to pay the tax. There's a little bit more to it than just outright, I'm going to rebel. It's because in 1794, William Miller plans to pack himself up, his wife, and I'm trying to see how many kids, and there are 4 children. So it's going to be William Miller, Rachel Miller, and their 4 children. William's plan to move them out of the Pittsburgh area and move them to the far-off land of Kentucky. It's like a tied in tonight. Don't you see the Kentucky on there? Yeah, see, they'll tie together tonight. It's like I planned this all out. So here comes Lennox. Here comes Neville. They're going to ride up to William Miller's shack, and they're going to serve him the court summons. And William is beside himself. He's in disbelief what's happening. Reportedly, Miller had been a longtime supporter of Neville in the Pittsburgh area. I also forgot to mention that Neville's family, and by family I mean his extended family, his in-laws, they're all connected in with all the businesses in Pittsburgh in the 1790s, including all sorts of mercantiles that are selling to the federal army going off to fight the Native Americans in the Northwest Territory. That's how Neville made a lot of his fortune, actually, was selling goods or knowing people to sell goods, such as whiskey, to the U.S. Army. And Goodman Fours tuned in. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Welcome to our talk about the only true battle of the Whiskey Rebellion. Things are about to get hot as Miller's just been served a summons to go to court in Philadelphia. Right as he about to leave to go to Kentucky. Miller is devastated. He has been a supporter of the Neville clan, I guess you want to say, in the Pittsburgh area and all they've done to support the U.S. government. And now he feels he's being betrayed, and he goes into a furious tirade that everybody around him could hear. Keep in mind, his brothers live on the neighboring properties, and they're out there probably working on their farms, and they all hear the shouting fest that's occurring by William's house. So they start to gather around. And reportedly, there's also some onlookers who have been following Lennox and Neville ever since they crossed the Monongahela River from downtown Pittsburgh. I don't think the cigar is going to work tonight. That's a bummer. Every time because I speak too much. Not good for speaking. That's fair. Life lesson. It tasted good. That's what matters. It had a good flavor to it. So you have these onlookers looking on from the woods. They've been shadowing Lennox and William. Lennox and Neville, my apologies. And William Miller is in a tangent, furious. He does not want to pay the tax. He just wants to leave. He wants to keep his family alive. He knows if he goes to Philadelphia, the family farm is going to fail. So he's at an impasse. And as this is going on, you're going to have all of these onlookers, many of them armed, since they've been hearing William fighting, and I can only presume it's several of his brothers. They see that the brother's in danger. They surround Neville and Lennox with guns. Nothing worse can happen here, right? So Neville and Lennox quickly realize that they're in a dangerous situation and they probably need to get out of here. And right they're about to leave, gunshots are heard. Now, we don't know if these are shots fired intentionally to kill the 2 federal authorities or if it was shot simply to scare the authorities off, warning shots. In any case, it scares the bejesus out of Lennox and Neville. Lennox is going to hightail it back to Pittsburgh, and Neville decides to hightail it back to Bower Hill, his mansion, and get ready for some type of confrontation. Somebody who was involved in this early commotion at the Miller homestead is going to run several miles over to the Mingo Creek Presbyterian Church. A little bit about the Mingo Creek Presbyterian Church. So we've talked earlier about how you have a lot of Scott Irish that are farmers in the Pittsburgh area, and they're Presbyterian. And these are the guys that outright refuse to pay the whiskey tax. And then you got some of your wealthier Pittsburghers like John Neville, who are attached to the Episcopal faith and have a lot of English ties. So this is just old school England versus Scott Irish. What's happening here? Just in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. At the end of the day, the Whiskey Rebellion is not all that special when you realize who's involved with it. In any case, the Mingo Creek Church is, the congregation for all of the major rebel leaders, including a man by the name of John Holcroft. And John Holcroft is one of the leaders of what's known as the Mingo Creek Association. It's essentially a fancy name for the local militia. And the Mingo Creek Association, They are the guys who have done a lot of the violent acts. They're the guys who've done the tar and feathering. They're the guys that have attacked people, who have destroyed people's stills because tax collectors came in and inspected it. So, and John Holcroft in particular is important because he's been writing for several years now in the Pittsburgh Gazette under the alias of Tom the Tinker. See, I told you, it came all around full circle. Now, for all records, it's generally assumed John Holcroft's Tom the Tinker. At the end of the day, he never publicly admitted to it, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out who it was. So John Holcroft, aka Tom the Tinker, he's there in the middle of mustering the local militia. Just because are outraged by the whiskey tax does not mean these guys are against supporting the United States in times of crisis. Militias are being called in Pennsylvania to assist Anthony Wayne's federal army that's fighting the Northwest War out west. So it was planned that the Mingo Creek Association would at least mobilize, if not go out and support and show, hey, our issues with the tax, we still want to be American citizens. That's all until this onlooker comes running in and tells a very embellished account of what had happened at the Miller homestead. They say that, somebody had been killed at the federal authorities. They were trying to drag William Miller to Pittsburgh to be arrested. The story's already being blown out of proportion. Totally would not have an involvement with this. And when John Holcroft hears this, he decides, all right, boys, let's go meet let's go find Mr. Neville and see if Mr. Lennox is there. And we're going to take him into custody and teach him what happens. We're going to teach him, we're going to give him a personal meeting with Tom the Tinker. And that's really the events of July 15th, 1794. Let us move to the events of July 16th, 1794. But first, I do want to show you, you can actually go and visit the site of the Miller incident. Now, William Miller's home's not preserved. It was a log shack. And in fact, James Miller's home's not preserved either. But James Miller's ancestors, the reason it's not preserved, they tore down the log structure and turned it into a massive stone structure, which is still standing today. So that's a photograph of the complex of James Miller's property, which was adjacent to William Miller's homestead. So keep that in mind. So you can actually go and visit that. Yes, and I'm totally not in any way pouring some more of the dangerous liquids because we're going to need it. We're going to need it, guys, because things are about to get dicey. Cheers. Good luck, Tom the Tinker. Good Pittsburgh rye. Oh, okay. Technically, it's actually Kentucky rye now, but used to be made near Pittsburgh. All right, and they're going to go to John Neville's home on the morning July 16th. And well, there is nothing left of Bower Hill today. There's a reason. You're about to learn why. But this is what the location looks like today. The top image is looking a bit I think we're looking to the west, and then the other image is looking back east. All that's there today to tell you about what happened there is a state historical marker. That's the blue marker. The granite marker you'll see in the middle of the lower image, that's actually the local honor roll. I was planning to do a video of retracing history about Bower Hill and what happened there. There was a lot of reasons. I had it planned. I had the days off. There was just a lot of reasons why it did not happen. Some of it was actually because Pittsburgh's traffic is a nightmare. So that's why we're doing this stream instead to make up for it. But in any case, we get to July 16th, 1794. And that image is not of Bower Hill. That image is of Woodville. That was the first house John Neville established in the Pittsburgh area. Though he didn't really live in it, his son Presley lived in it. And John Neville is living up street across on Bower Hill. But it is believed that Woodville and Bower Hill's construction was very similar. The difference is Bower Hill had a second story. So that's why I'm showing you the image of Woodville, which you can see still stands. And you can go visit it today. And I need water. I need water. Water.
Hi, man.
What are you doing?
I'm drinking wine and eating cheese and catching some rays, you know.
So, early morning, July 16th, 1794. Neville is probably not gotten a good night's sleep. he's expecting something to happen. He knows his name's been spoken in ill will for months around the Pittsburgh area. And the event at the Miller homestead just seemed to be the worst case scenario for him. Now, it is expected that the night of the 15th and the 16th, he actually armed his enslaved individuals. And he may have actually been doing this for a number of weeks. I read in a book, Brady Kreitzer's account of the Whiskey Rebellion, that back in April, while Mr. Neville was riding on horseback with one of his granddaughters, I believe, something crazy happened. This guy, like German individual, that's all it's described as, a German man, came onto the property and just yanked Neville off the horse and tried to beat him up. And Neville was able to get away. But ever since that encounter, he had been starting to arm his enslaved individuals and have them stand watch around the property. So it's very likely that on the morning of July 16th, you have about a dozen armed individuals that were slaves of Mr. Neville trying to guard the property. I also want to mention that Mr. Neville, again, is a general from the American Revolution who has lived on the frontier for many years now, and he's dealt with things like native raids on his property. So he's probably conditioned his wife and his granddaughter, and also his granddaughter's friend is staying at the house that night. He's probably got them all full prepped on what we do if we're under attack, which is load, 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 and I will shoot, shoot, shoot. So that's probably what Mr. Holcroft and about 30 militiamen are walking into. They're going to try to surround the house in a half crescent. And when Neville shouts out, "Who's in the woods?" somebody, probably Holcroft, tries to be a little smart and says, "Friends from Washington County." And then Neville fires. And unfortunately, the first shot that is fired from Mr. Neville's gun hits a 16-year-old boy by the name of Oliver Miller Jr. And yes, he is actually the nephew of William Miller, the man whose rage about being served a court summons started this whole scenario. So William Miller's just lost a nephew, and all hell breaks loose on Bower Hill. The rebels start opening fire on the mansion. John Neville is the only man. Maybe his wife is also with a gun trying to shoot out. We know there's enslaved individuals as well shooting. And for about the next half hour, there is a sharp skirmish on the front door of the Bower Hill, the Neville plantation. After about a half hour of fighting, depends on who you ask, Neville claims that he was able to wound multiple of the rebels and had forced them to drag their wounded off the field. Holcroft claims that they were outflanked by armed slaves and forced to fall off of Bower Hill. I actually believe Holcroft's account. I don't think Neville was hitting everybody. He got a good shot on Mr. Miller. Got a shot on, unfortunately, Oliver Miller Jr., but I don't know about the other guys. So in any case, after a half hour, the shooting stops, and Holcroft pulls the militiamen about 4 to 5 miles to the southeast at a place known as Couch's Fort. Couch's Fort is now a McDonald's. Yeah, you heard that right. Yeah, there's nothing left at Couch's Fort. It's a freaking McDonald's. And it used to be one of the nice, colorful red ones. Not anymore. It is now a dull charcoal. Why is it that all McDonald's are grayscale now? What is it with this grayscale that every fast food restaurant is going to? It's ugly. It's lifeless. I have theories why they're doing it, and I don't want to talk about them tonight. But it's just like, why? Any comment in the chat right now. Why is McDonald's and all fast food places, why do they insist on grayscale as their current motif? This totally is not an excuse just to enjoy this nice bourbon whiskey cigar. By the way, which is nicknamed the Rabbit Hole. And we're going down the McDonald's grayscale rabbit hole right now. So I want to see some comments there in the chat before we continue our talk. Oh no, King Bob is thinking. That's a scary thing. King Bob says, if I were drunk, I would probably think you were talking about English soccer and computers. Or maybe English soccer and AC units. Very possible. That would be a very interesting stream you would be enjoying. All right. So, they go to this Couch's Fort, which really isn't much of a fort. Couch's Fort had been set up by the local settlers during the American Revolution to protect themselves from British-backed native raids in the Pittsburgh area. But since the Revolution, it kind of just fallen apart. Maybe what's standing there is an old storehouse and part of the palisade wall and everything else is fallen in. But it's a good meeting place. Even today, Couch's Fort, where this ugly McDonald's is, sits as a very important crossroads in the South Hills of Pittsburgh. So a lot of people coming and going. Holcroft reconvenes the militia there, and it's around midday now. And they're like, okay, we've just fired on a federal official. And somebody's just been killed. There's going to be problems. What are we going to do about it? And everybody decides, you know what? We should disperse, go raise the alarm for all the militias in the Pittsburgh area, and we're going to get them all back here tomorrow, and then we'll figure out what we'll do. We may also bring a few of these along the way. So Holcroft's band dispersed for the rest of the day. Meanwhile, back at Bower Hill, Neville's, of course, panicking because he's like, oh no, they're probably going to come back. And even with maybe there's 18 at most, I'd have to guess. If you had Neville, you had his wife, if she is participating in the shooting, and if you have his enslaved individuals, I don't know, maybe 15. You had 14, 15 individuals that are armed. And they already just they barely held off 30 guys. And Neville knows that everybody south of the Three Rivers hates his guts now. So he is going to call a family favor. I believe it's going to be, let me look up for certain. Do I have it written down? He's going to contact Fort Fayette, which is the main federal stronghold in Pittsburgh. It's not Fort Pitt anymore. It's Fort Fayette now. And they are separate structures. A little bit of backstory. During the American Revolution, Fort Pitt just fell into an intense state of disrepair. Neither Virginia nor Pennsylvania could agree over who owned the forks of the Ohio River. It involved the federal government stepping in and declaring it Pennsylvania land, though they did grant a panhandle to Virginia so they can trade on the Ohio River. That is why you have the panhandle of West Virginia today. That's really weird around Pennsylvania and Ohio. So, in any case, Pitt had fallen into a state of disrepair, so the federal government decided it was wiser to build a smaller fort up street. I think it's up Penn Avenue in downtown Pittsburgh. And they called Fort Lafayette after the Marquis de Lafayette. It's really just called Fort Fayette by the locals. And there's like a few federal soldiers there, not many. Keep in mind, most of the federal army, the standing army, is out west, hundreds of miles west of Pittsburgh, fighting Native Americans in the Northwest Territory. So these guys are really here just to protect the supplies coming over the mountains down Forbes's Road from Philadelphia, getting on the flatboats, and then being carried down the Ohio River to Cincinnati, and then going to support Anthony Wayne. They're not planning to go into battle. They're under the command of Neville's brother-in-law by the name of Abraham Kirkpatrick, Major Abraham Kirkpatrick, who is the brother-in-law of John Neville. Told you, Neville got all these friends in high places. Basically, the Neville clan ruled Pittsburgh in 1794. This is embarrassing. It keeps going out. I keep talking too much, but that's probably good for my health. Good talking is good for my health. And James Esparza responds on the McDonald's drama. Gray is a neutral color and blends with everything. It could be a way of getting people to obey as the color of psychology of gray is conformity. Most people don't know you are in fact influenced by color. And thank you, James Esparza, for giving probably how I can't say my opinions because I'm going to get into way too much trouble probably, especially because we're doing some of this tonight and I'm trying to keep on the historical subject matter. But thank you for the comments. You probably have my endorsement. Also, James Esparza, by the way, he is the gentleman that gave us the lovely. He gave us the lovely logo. Not that logo. You saw it briefly, right, guys? Where's the logo? James Esparza did the new logo for Redoubt Productions. I greatly appreciate that. He just sent it to me one day as a gift, and I've been using it ever since. So, Mr. Esparza, I'm in debt to you. That is an awesome logo, and hopefully brings goodwill for the channel here. Anyways, back to the Whiskey Rebellion. I'm getting distracted. So, oh no, I'm gonna get more distracted. All the fast food joints are being turned into Saturnian cubes. There's my conspiracy theory for today. Wow, Mr. Deep Pockets can afford fast food. Living big, huh? I didn't say I can afford fast food. I can't afford fast food. I go to my diner and lose all my money. That's where I go eat. I just lose all my money at my local diner. So, Neville, he's at Bower Hill, reeling from the morning shooting, calls his brother-in-law, Major Abraham Kirkpatrick, down at Fort Fayette and says, hey, can you send me some reinforcements? I've just been shot at by the rebels. And Kirkpatrick's probably going, I got like a dozen, I can probably give you a dozen guys. Everybody else is out with Matt Anthony Wayne. That's fine. I just need some guys with accuracy. So, under the cover of darkness, July 16th going into the 17th, Major Kirkpatrick is going to rush. Initially, I think he was trying to send about 24 soldiers up to Bower Hill, but about half of them, they got cold feet and ran back to Fort Fayette. Like, yeah, I don't want to get shot up. I don't want to get shot up by these rebels. These are ex-patriots, by the way. So Kirkpatrick and a dozen federal soldiers are now defending Bower Hill. And around this time, Kirkpatrick tells Neville it's probably best to get out of Dodge. And at some point, in every account of the Whiskey Rebellion, there's a dispute as to when Neville leaves Bower Hill. But at some point, under the cover of darkness into the early morning of July 17th, Neville runs to Pittsburgh, where he has a second house. So don't feel bad to him. He has a nice, lovely townhouse. And that brings us to July 17th, 1794. And early morning dawns over Bower Hill. Kirkpatrick and his dozen soldiers and presumably Neville's slaves, they're all standing around the mansion, and they can hear drums. And they can hear fifes. And the ground may even be starting to rumble. Because it's expected that hundreds of militiamen have turned out to support what is happening here. In the early morning hours of July 17th, all these militiamen convened at Couch's Fort, debated what they were going to do. They decided the best course of action was to request Neville to resign. And I completely forgot to mention that the whole reason this started is that Holcroft believed Lennox was being protected by Neville at Bower Hill. Lennox is in Pittsburgh this whole time. The guy that was actually serving the court summons, he is never at Bower Hill during these events. So the militiamen initially thought Lennox was up there. That is why they went and were going to confront Neville. But then Neville shot at them and killed a 16-year-old boy. And then everything just spiraled out of control. And everybody just kind of lost the plot. So we think it's about 500. I will safely say hundreds of militiamen turn out to Couch's Fort and decide we're going back to Bower Hill. We're going to show force to whoever's up there, and we request Neville do what he should have done a long time ago and resign as the revenue inspector of Pittsburgh. That's all they're asking of him. So they march out there early morning, and they find Neville's not there. And Kirkpatrick and one of the leaders of the Whiskey Boys by the name of Daniel Hamilton, they're going to both go out and they're going to kind of convene in the courtyard of the plantation. And they're going to try to figure out what is their next best course of action. And I'm just kind of looking through my notes, which are all over the darn place. I got to make sure it's the right Hamilton. I put in, okay, not Daniel, David Hamilton. And I greatly apologize I made that mistake. I'll tell you why. There is a Daniel Hamilton. There's several Hamiltons during the Whiskey Rebellion. It can get confusing. So ignore my slideshow. Blame it on Mr. Overholt. David Hamilton is going to step forward from the massive militia who have encircled Bower Hill. He's going to go up to the courtyard, and he's going to go talk with Major Kirkpatrick. Can Neville come out? Neville is not here. Oh, really? Well, what are we going to do now? And Neville, wow, getting confused. Kirkpatrick's like, well, the least you guys can do is maybe allow the women that are up in the house to leave. Because this whole time, Mrs. Neville, her granddaughter, and her granddaughter's friend are still trapped in Bower Hill. And Hamilton grants it. The women are allowed to leave from Bower Hill. And then Hamilton asks, can we go in and inspect the house to see that Neville truly is not here? And then we'll leave. And Kirkpatrick's like, maybe. There's great controversy over actually what the terms were. And essentially, everything escalates to Hamilton asks, will you guys just surrender? Lay down your arms and disperse. Kirkpatrick, of course, says, I am a major of the United States Army. I am not surrendering to an angry mob. So at that point, Hamilton decides, have it your way, goes back into the woods, and turns to the commander of the militiamen, who is James McFarland. He is also a veteran of the American Revolution. Just basically assume almost everybody on both sides who's a commander in this event is from the American Revolution, which does actually make it makes it a bit tragic what's happening here. You're having these former soldiers and former commanders that served alongside each other to create the United States of America. Now they're threatening to fight each other and almost destroy the country they created. James McFarland gives the command to start opening fire on Bower Hill. As the shooting starts between the small federal contingent, again, come on, a dozen federal soldiers under Kirkpatrick's command with some enslaved individuals with guns trying to defend this mansion against hundreds of militiamen. Some of them, like William Miller, who by all counts is involved in this militia, who we've just said is from Daniel Morgan's riflemen during the Revolution. So these guys are skilled marksmen, are out in the woods. This shooting escalates. And McFarland believes he sees a white flag being put in front of the window. Maybe Kirkpatrick has changed his mind and he's going to surrender. Yes, Birds. Do you think that Kirkpatrick's surrendering? Well, I have news for you. Will you shut up? I'm going to tell you. My birds are going crazy. I don't know what I said. They just started going ballistic. What? Maybe it's past their bedtime. They're not used to people being down here past 8 o'clock. So McFarland starts walking forward and trying to call his men to stop shooting. They're raising a white flag. Well, the other guys don't see it. And McFarland walks out and is shot. And he is shot in the groin and dies almost immediately. So now 2 of the rebels have been killed in the shooting at Bower Hill. And the death of McFarland in particular. So first, keep in mind, first we had the death of Oliver William Jr. on July 16th. So there's a 16-year-old boy killed. On the next day, we have James McFarland, a respected veteran of the American Revolution, killed while trying to answer a flag of truce, supposedly. So these 2 guys killed really enrages the mob. And what's going to follow is you're going to have just heavy gunfire poured upon Bower Hill. It's impressive that the Federals officially do not report any casualties. I don't know how, but they're not harmed. Maybe because, again, just because these guys were marksmen in the Revolution, these rebels may be drinking some stuff. So the shooting intensifies. The rebels are able to close enough where they start setting fire to the outbuildings of Bower Hill. And at this point, most of the federal soldiers want to get out of there because they know once the outbuildings go up, the mansion itself is next. So at this point, the federal soldiers, they start coming out of the house and running with arms up right toward the rebel militia. And by all accounts, the Battle of Bower Hill has concluded. Kirkpatrick himself does not surrender. He tries to make a beeline for it back to Pittsburgh, but some of the militiamen will capture him in the nearby woods and bring him into custody for the rest of the day. The rebels storm Bower Hill, tear apart all the furnishings that are inside of it. This is why we believe there is no surviving portrait of John Neville, because it's destroyed by the rebels. And then once they've busted open the still. By the way, I didn't even tell you this. John Neville had he had the biggest still in the Pittsburgh area. So once they bust into all of, Mr. Neville's fine spirits, they're then going to set fire to the mansion, razing it to the ground. And that's why there's nothing left of Bower Hill today. It's because the 500 or the hundreds of militiamen that attacked Bower Hill, they burned the whole property to the ground, destroying it. And that is the end of the only true battle of the Whiskey Rebellion. Officially, 2 rebel militiamen have been killed, Oliver Miller Jr. and James McFarland. They'll be given honorable burials. McFarland is buried now actually at the Mingo Creek Presbyterian Church. It is expected that there were multiple other casualties amongst both sides, but they're not well documented. So how many of the militiamen are wounded? How many of the federal soldiers are wounded? Were there any federal soldiers killed? And also, what about the enslaved individuals who were likely armed during this? No real reports about them. It's unfortunate. So what does this all mean? What does this mean for the United States of America in the immediate aftermath? Well, it ain't good. So enforcing the tax. Take two. So John Neville had fled to Pittsburgh, as I mentioned. He is going to be approached by David Hamilton a couple days after the Bower Hill incident. And Hamilton, who's probably still smelling of whiskey and fire, he is going to ask Neville, turn in your damn commission as inspector revenue of the area. Neville at last obliges. So the actual turning over the commission did not happen until after the house was raised, after all this mess was over. This all ended with two men, I don't know, sitting down, standing in the doorway, talking it out. Neville turns over his commission. He didn't officially resign. He just turned over the paperwork. And later that night, I think it was July 19th, he and Presley, his son, they're going to get into a barge and float down the Ohio River far enough away that they're away from any rebels. And then they're going to make a harrowing several-week journey over the Appalachian Mountains through northern Virginia, eventually getting back to Philadelphia to tell them what had happened. In the intermediate time, the militias basically have full reign over southwestern Pennsylvania. They're now the de facto leaders of the region. And they're going to convene a massive massive meeting at the Mingo Creek Presbyterian Church, where they're going to decide that they must do something about Fort Fayette and the federal soldiers inside. And this is going to lead to the largest gathering of people for the Whiskey Rebellion. Several thousand people turn out on August 1st and 2nd, 1794 at Braddock's Field, just 9 miles south of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. There's complete with fife and drum, pomp and circumstance. We even got a general that's promoted. You can learn more about that this Saturday in this edition of Retracing History, where we talk about the life of the Whiskey Rebellion's general. Ultimately, they do not attack Fort Fayette. What they end up doing is they march into downtown Pittsburgh, make a big demonstration of force, and then march out and have a very nice buffet. And as for the federal government, when they receive word that the Inspector of Revenue's house has been completely destroyed, shots been fired, people are dead, by all accounts, Western Pennsylvania is in full rebellion against the United States of America. It is decided by Congress and fully supported by Alexander Hamilton with much glee that a federal army needs to be raised to suppress the Western insurrection. That is right. Actually, this is never called the Whiskey Rebellion in any contemporary accounts. At most, it's called like the Western Rebellion or the Western Insurrection. The Whiskey Rebellion name only comes around a few years later. That's a post-event name that we call it today. Hamilton is going to jump with joy when he hears that George Washington is going to become the commander of this federal army being raised to suppress the rebels. That is right. This is the first and only time a president will command an army in the battlefield in American military history. By the way, that was really not much of a federal army. The actual federal army was out fighting the natives. They'll have victory at the Battle of Fallen Timbers. This army led by Washington is called the Watermelon Army. And they were a bunch of, well, the Western militia are in rebellion. So all your good soldiers are in rebellion. So these were the drags, the drags of the cities. So you'll never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy than you would with the Watermelon Army in 1794. And if you want to learn more about the Watermelon Army, check out our video where we actually visit George Washington's headquarters in Bedford, Pennsylvania during the Whiskey Rebellion. Make a long story short, by the time the Watermelon Army gets to Pittsburgh, there is no battle. Most of the militiamen got cold feet by this point. They didn't want to fire against George Washington. They go into hiding. Some of the leaders take flight down the Ohio River in a very similar manner that Neville had done a few months earlier. Hamilton and Light Horse Harry Lee are going to come into downtown Pittsburgh, go down to Washington, Pennsylvania as well, and serve hundreds of arrest warrants. Ultimately, Hamilton will get 200 individuals rounded up, put them into a makeshift prison in November in Pittsburgh with no proper facilities for 2 weeks. But he doesn't have enough evidence to take most of them to federal court. Actually, it's only about 20 men will actually be forced to make the harrowing march from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia in the winter, no less. Don't you see why I don't like Alexander Hamilton? And eventually, when they get to Philadelphia, everybody comes out, including John Neville and Presley Neville. They actually get to witness these 20 rebels that are federal prisoners being paraded into Philadelphia. And they're going to be in another prison for several more months. At the end of all of this, only 2 men are found guilty of treason. And they're both pardoned by George Washington. That is right. Alexander Hamilton, the federal government got nobody to actually stand anything more than time served for their actions during the Whiskey Rebellion. They were either all let go due to lack of evidence or pardoned by Washington. Oh, sorry about that. How about that? Thank you for letting me know, Swords and Starships. Thank you for letting me know about that. Hopefully you can still hear me. Like I mentioned earlier, this is how quiet it is. So quiet. So guys, please let me know right now if you can still hear me. I've turned it down just a little bit more. My hot takes. When's the last time President did that? 1794 during this event. It's crazy. Washington, I have a lot to say about Washington. I have a lot of criticism, but that is one of the things you can say about him. He did, when there was a situation, he took it by the horns. It is a lot of what the only people do remember about this event is that Washington, it's the only time a standing president leads an army, doesn't lead into battle, but he does lead an army. So it's usually what most people remember about. Nobody actually talks about the actual fighting. How about now? I sound like a drowned cat. I sound like a drowned cat. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. Hey, thank you guys for no, and I'm dead serious, guys. Thank you for letting me know in the chat about that. Like I said, we're testing out a new microphone at the moment. It's not the best. I'm not in my normal setup, as you can see, minus the 18th century attire. I'm talking about the fact I'm not in my recording area. And if you are hearing chirping, there's sadly not much I can do about it. That's our live audience. Our parakeets. They're our live entertainment. And they let me know if I'm doing really good or really, really weird. Not bad, just, weird. So, yeah, at the end, the Whiskey Rebellion, it fizzles out at the end of 1794. There's only one major skirmish, and that's what we talked about today, the fighting on Bower Hill. What becomes of everybody? Well, John Neville, he does not return to Bower Hill. It's been completely ruined. He's economically devastated. He does have that nice townhouse in downtown Pittsburgh, though, so he's going to stay there for many years. His wife will die a few years later in 1797, and then I think it's around 1800, he removes to be the ruler of an island. Okay, he doesn't actually do like the Napoleon thing and move out like into like St. Helena. What he ends up doing is he actually acquires property on a large island in the Ohio River downstream from Pittsburgh, and it becomes known as Neville Island, and it's still known that today. So if you're from Pittsburgh and you're watching this and you do not know who John Neville was, it's that Neville we've been talking about, the man who Neville Island's named after, where he would only live 3 more years. He died in 1803. His body moved around a few times in the Pittsburgh area since then. He's kind of gone to multiple cemeteries over the years. The Birdseed, yeah, it's a really good. The Birdseed Gallery is a really good description of that place up there. I'm gonna have to clean that tomorrow. Crap. So that's what happened to John Neville. His name would be ever smeared as the guy who killed Oliver Miller Jr., that he was the tax collector of Pittsburgh and he brought all this trouble to the region. To be fair, as much as I have criticism about Neville more than your average historian, I will still say, at the end of the day, I don't know if I don't think it was cool that, his family had to suffer through that whole shootout. That probably not good. And the complete destruction of his property. I'm thinking more about his overall family. Not good. So not a good showing by the Whiskey Rebels. As for, we talked that James McFarland was killed during the shooting at Bower Hill. He was interned at Mingo Creek Church. What became of John Holcroft? John Holcroft, he ultimately doesn't get really punished for anything, even though he was writing all of them somewhat sedacious writings. And I'm going to be right back, guys. I got to go take care of something. Hold on. I'll be back momentarily. We're going to play.
Down with the traitors, up with the stars. We will reel around the flag, boys and relay once again, shouting the battle cry of freedom. Springing to the goal of your brothers born before, shouting the battle cry of freedom.
All right, thank you guys for waiting. Dog had to go out. He's a quiet dog, so the only time he has to go do the business is when he bolts for the door. So I gotta go. So John Holcroft, he hasn't really faced much punishment either. I should have done too much research on what became of John Holcroft with the Whiskey Rebellion. I should do more about that. Like I said, he never personally confirms that he is Tom the Tinker, but a lot of his peers theorized it was him, said it was him, so we presume it was him. He'll end up living, according to Find a Grave, he lives till 1816, lives to the age of 75 years old. As for Alexander Hamilton actually will resign as Secretary of the Treasury in early 1795. And the Whiskey Rebellion, although the Whiskey Rebellion is technically put down, it put the whiskey tax had put a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths back in Philadelphia. And as the violence escalated, while nobody condoned the violence, they also were a little bit sympathetic to the rebels. So Hamilton lost a lot of favor that he had. Well, the little favor he had left of Congress, because Hamilton's just the way he spoke to people and the way he presented his ideas were not in a, here, let me show you how we're going to do this. It was, I know better than everybody else. I am going to save the world. He had definitely a hero complex to himself, God complex a little bit. So yeah, Hamilton always rubbed people the wrong way, just was not good at expressing his thoughts and his opinions. He was right and nobody else was. So the Whiskey Rebellion really soured his reputation, and there's a whole bunch of other scandalous stuff that we don't have time to get into about Mr. Hamilton. So he'll resign shortly after the Whiskey Rebellion, and he'll go on one day to be involved in a duel with Aaron Burr. I can't comment on that, because if I do comment on it, the two of you will be very mad. So yeah, anything I need to wrap up? The whiskey tax could remain in place until the early 1800s, when Thomas Jefferson takes charge of the United States, the third president of our country. And in a sense, Thomas Jefferson became president because of the Whiskey Rebellion. This really got earned, the Whiskey Rebellion really helped solidify the Democratic Republican Party, that factionalism that's growing between the Federalist Party and the Democratic Republicans. The Democratic Republicans were sympathetic to the Whiskey Rebels. They're sympathetic to the French Revolutionaries. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. Condescending. That's what Hamilton was, condescending. So the Whiskey Rebellion event, this big crisis, the first crisis the government suffered under the U.S. Constitution, really emboldened the political split between the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. And while John Adams will become president, the second president of the country, it didn't really help make people happy. It only led to further conflict between the Federalists and Democratic Republicans. And ultimately, this gave the Democratic Republicans enough ammunition that, hey, the federal government got too much power, leading to Thomas Jefferson to become president of the country and really establishing the two-party political system that, for better or worse, we still are under. So, that's the legacy of the Whiskey Rebellion. Taxes repealed by Jefferson in the early 1800s. Although there will be a myriad of other taxes that come down the pipeline that American taxpayers have to pay today. Didn't our country get partly founded on the fact that we didn't want to be, no taxation about representation? That we were being overly taxed by the British. Now, I actually dispute that to an extent. In the 1760s, I've heard a claim. I could be wrong. I swear, which book was? I want to say it's Scratch the Parchment, 1763, by Colin Calloway, where this statistic is given. That before the American Revolution, before the taxes are imposed that we rebelled from partly, for every 26 pounds of tax paid in London, a taxpayer in New York only paid 1 pound. That is why the taxes are increased in the United States afterwards to pay for the debt of the French-Indian War, because the king was like, hey, these guys aren't paying hardly anything. Let's make it equal to everybody else in the British Empire. But we didn't see it as that. We saw it as being outrageously taxed. This little thing caused a whirlwind of troubles. If I came to visit, would I get an outfit like that? Potentially. This is the only one I have. I've been from years been slowly putting together actually a American Revolution Pennsylvania militia kit. I'm not done with it. I need breeches or get any gaiters. I need leg stuff. That's why you don't see below the camera. I promise I'm wearing pants on all streams. I always wear pants on streams. There's some streamers out there that do not, and that is scary. But that's why we do a chest above and why I do the dress some nights, because I got the hunter's frock and I got this old beat up tricorn cap that's a friend of mine. Oh, thank you, Garrett. The parakeets are acceptable. They're acceptable shipmates. Yeah. So I'm glad I got to do this tonight. Really wanted to talk about the skirmish at Bower Hill, because this is the true fighting of the Whiskey Rebellion, which in the grand scheme of things, compared to other insurrections and, American history, like the American Civil War or the Battle of Blair Mountain, or other events we've talked about here before where, we have federal forces duking it out with American citizens, like the Waco siege. This really gets overlooked. Nobody talks about it. We talk about the Whiskey Rebellion, and we talk about it was involved in whiskey, and then we talk about Washington leading an army, and that's really about it. There's so much more to it. So, and what I'm trying to do on the channel is, you'll notice I've never done like a one and done Whiskey Rebellion account, because there's no way to do the Whiskey Rebellion one and done, at least not for me personally, being from the area where it all happened. So I'm going to tonight into tomorrow try to set up a playlist where you can watch our current videos about aspects of rebellion. Those videos would include a visit to Friendship Hill, the home of Albert Gallatin, who I actually had a cut from tonight's stream. His portrait was in one of the earlier slides. Albert Gallatin was a state representative. Briefly, he was actually a U.S. Senator for Pennsylvania before the Federalists kicked him out on technicalities, which that didn't sit well with Western Pennsylvanians and helped to embolden the Democratic Republicans. Albert Gallatin was a moderate supporter of the Whiskey Rebellion and one of their main spokespeople when it came to parleying with federal forces. Gallatin's home is still preserved today by the National Park Service. I got a chance to visit it. It's documented in an episode of Retracing History, and Gallatin's great. Next thing, you can go check that video out, Friendship Hill. We have the video about Washington's headquarters during the Whiskey Rebellion, during the thing that I'm drinking. Go check that out. You go we don't go inside the house. We actually go around and talk about what happened in the household when Washington stays there during the Whiskey Rebellion. We're going to have this Saturday a video about the general of the Whiskey Rebels. We go to his house and talk about his legacy. And now we got this live stream to throw in there about the actual fighting at Bower Hill. And I'm still not done. I'd love to go see Mingo Creek Church. It's a very historic site. The cemetery got some old graves, according to people involved with the Whiskey Rebellion, like James McFarland. His grave is there. But the problem right now is the road to get to it is shut down. You can get to it, but it's like an 9 mile like detour to get to the church. So another day. Should have said a twister of trouble. Oh, well, that magic word. That magic word. And for those that don't know, last week's Retracing History, we actually went in and talked about Twisters, the sequel that was surprisingly good to Twister. We didn't really talk about the movie too much. Rather, I went to a premiere for the movie at a drive-in movie theater, a drive-in theater that's almost 80 years old. So that was last week's Retracing History. So consider checking it out. And Swords and Starships tunes in. Taxes theft. The British weren't listening to those they governed. That was the issue. Love to see you do 15-minute quick history videos. Yeah, I need to learn how to crunch things down to 15 minutes. Not particularly good at that, but I'm trying to improve. Well, I will improve. But I hope one day I want to do something different for Readout Productions, and it's going to have to happen. This month, guys, has been July, I should say. Last month was wild. That was good for the channel. I would say the best part of the month was what was happening with the channel. But there was some other stuff just going on behind the scenes. Just some rough times. Not just for myself, but for friends, for coworkers, for just for the whole darn country. I mean, you know what happened. I don't need to get into it. It was just one wild month. And I think there's going to be some serious changes happening both in my own life and also in the world, for better or worse, that are going to impact how I handle Readout Productions in one way or another. I don't know how that's going to alter it. I don't know if it'll alter it, but definitely we're getting to a point where I'm going to have to think about how I'm going to have to make the content more conducive to other things I want to do in life. So yeah, I'm definitely going to have to start focusing on trying to do shorter videos. I'm definitely going to want to get experimental and try some different types of formats. Retracing History itself hinges on going to the location, and that's not always feasible. And I worry it's become more and more unfeasible. So yeah, I'm definitely going to try to maybe do some quicker. I want to do, because I got in some hot water a few weeks ago. We did that tier ranking of the insignias of the federal corps during the American Civil War, and I kind of went on a over energetic tirade about a certain insignia, and some people caught it the wrong way, and I was being disrespectful, and that's not what I intended, of course. But it did make me say that I really want to do short histories of every Union Army Corps. Go through all 25 of them. So it's something I've been thinking about. They don't be about 10 minutes long. Just tell them who's this corps is, who's the commanders, what key events, and what impact do they leave on the United States military. They are good, but I got a bad tendency to quickly get tongue-tied and then just lose the plot. So I like doing these, but I get tongue-tied. And these live streams, some of them do really, the Atlanta one's doing pretty decent. And man, the Overland campaigns, I am humbled by how well they perform. I think it was because I was doing them right as the anniversaries were happening and people were looking it up. So those ones did very good. But then there's some live streams that are just dead in the water. And, it's what it is. It's what you guys want me to make on the channel. Now, before we leave tonight, we are going to wind things down. First, I hear dog barking. I got to bring dog back in.
Springing to the goal of your brothers born before, shouting the battle cry of freedom, and we'll come from the ranks with a million free more, shouting the battle cry of freedom, the union forever, hurrah, boys, hurrah, down with the traitors, up with the stars, we will really from the flag, boys, and really once again, shouting the battle cry of freedom.
All right, I'm back. One more time for you. Dog break. Yep. You said it, Ghost Power's right arm. Dog break. So, to wrap things up, one of the projects I've been working on for a while, but I only have had like small times every night after, doing work, doing Readout Productions, doing, essential life things. At the very end of the day, I've been trying to start eking out the first episode of a new series that's going to be on our sister channel, the Food Bar Digital Lounge. And it is titled Hammered History. Oh yeah, I went there. So it will not be here on the main channel, and part of the reason is, I mean, I made an exception tonight with having the whiskey and trying to have the cigar on. I made this as a one-time exception with a disclaimer to start the video. At the end of the day, I really want this channel to be for education for most age groups, like teenagers and older, or people that can handle, the real world at the very least. I want this to be an easily accessible channel, so I try to keep crazy stuff like alcohol and tobacco off, and also just crazy stuff like talking about movies and stuff, because those don't seem to be too popular on here. So we set up a while ago a sister channel for myself and my fellow history buff, a humble collector, to really just have fun. I'm not expecting to go big with it, but hey, we want to talk about this and have it on the record. It was initially the Heterochromedia Podcast. We decided to rebrand it as the Fubar Digital Lounge. And while we're going to keep talking about pop culture, we also decided as a wonderful platform to do kind of a drunk history series. I want to say we're drunk. I'd say it's more like a tipsy history. And it's really just us, just shooting the crap about historical events. So Hammered History, what its concept is, me and a humble collector both go and read a book about a historical event, probably one that's semi-obscure and also is very ludicrous. And then we get together, enjoy some drinks, enjoy some libations, sit out and just go through the events, describe to you in our words the historical event and all the hijinks that will ensue from us trying to explain a historical event with our nerdy sense of humor. So the first episode of Hammered History is not going to be here in the Readout Productions. It's going to be releasing on the Fubar Digital Lounge tomorrow. I am going to drop you the link right now as the premiere set up. As long as I'm available and no crazy things occur, I'm going to try to be in the chat for part of it, because it's a podcast. It's going to be about 2 hours long, guys. I'm not going to deny to you. So that is coming out tomorrow. That's a new thing I'm working on. So if you want to hear more of me with a co-host rambling on about a crazy historical event, there is the link. It's in the chat now. Go. If you want, I'd appreciate if you want to like it now, get yourself notifications ready. That should go live tomorrow. I'm going to try to be in the chat for it when it goes live so I can communicate with you guys if you have any questions. It's going to be a blast. We're talking about the 2nd Pacific Squadron of the Russian Navy in 1904 and 05. And if you know, and I think Swords and Starships may know about it, it is one of the craziest naval stories ever to happen. So it's a great thing. So that's something new I'm working on. That's something new I've been working on in the background. Finally got it edited last night. So it's coming out this Friday for you guys to enjoy and have fun. New episode of Retracing History drops this Saturday, of course, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it is Whiskey Rebellion themed, as I've been advertising. And, well, we'll see you guys next time. This is the end of the stream. Hey, thank you guys for tuning in. It's been a great stream. I've had a lot of fun. I always have fun doing these streams. So thank you guys for being a lovely chat. Thank you for supporting Readout Productions. And we will see you whenever next time is. That could be next Thursday, maybe on the road, and maybe a month. Who knows? Maybe it'll be in a bunker. Who knows? So I'll play the music, and we are going out. We're going out. Have a good night, everybody.
History around the flag, boys will really once again, shouting a battle cry of freedom. We will really from the hillside, all together from the plain, shouting a battle cry of freedom. The Union forever, hurrah, boys, hurrah! Down with the traitors, up with the stars. We will reel around the flag, boys, and really once again, shouting a battle cry of freedom.